Hey guys, sorry about the wait. I had some trouble with getting the video set up, and for some reason it wasn't working, and I had to basically restart the entire computer, and of course that wasn't going very well or easily. So anyway, welcome to the show. I haven't done one of these live ones in a while. I am going to go take a look at some of the stuff. I have a bunch of different things that I wanted to cover, and it's a new format, right? Like I want to do a live show, and I want to make sure that I'm getting everything that I want out of it, and I want to update you guys. I want to make sure that I'm doing something that is impactful, and that you guys get something out of. Anyway, so let me start with a screen share, and then we'll go from there. Let's see how easy that is. Application window or the entire screen. All right, I guess I could just do the entire screen. All right, there we go. All right, so this Bitcoin Tech Talk, that's my newsletter. If you don't know about it, you can sign up. There's a link below in the comments and things like that. Let's take a look. Wow, there's a lot of people in the chat. 57 people watching. I didn't expect that many people. Anyway, so let's start with this Explora. This is from Blockstream, and this is their open source software to be able to have a block explorer sort of locally, and this is fantastic. I love the fact that they have released it as an open source software. If you click through here, you can see exactly how to set it up. I actually haven't looked at the source code very closely, or what it's built on, but it does look like it's Node.js. There's an npm install command in there. And basically what you can do is, if you are running, I think oh wow, there's a Docker image. Oh, that's amazing. So if you have Docker, it's like super simple to just run a block explorer. In fact, I'll probably try doing this later today. I mean, this is like insanely easy. And of course, you can do this for Bitcoin mainnet. You could do this for Liquid mainnet. You could do this for Bitcoin testnet as well. And if you are a developer, it's very, very useful having Bitcoin testnet. The only real thing, let me see what are the requirements here. Explora, written as a single page app in a React and functional style. Oh, it's using React. That's interesting. Support for SegWit and Bec32. Shows previous output and spending transaction details. Yes, very, very important. Git clone, building to build this. Okay, yeah, you do need to do all of that stuff. But is there, I wonder where it gets all of the data. Do you need Bitcoin D running, or does it run one for you? It looks like it just sort of runs. So anyway, this is a really cool project. And if it's pretty easy, I think what I'll do is have a video just showing you how to run one of these. I do get requests a lot to, hey, how do I set up a full node? A full node isn't that interesting unless there's something that you can use to like look it up, or if you're using it, obviously if you're using like a core wallet or something like that, then a full node is very useful. But this is, I think, a very good application of using it, because if you have this running locally, then you are not giving up any of your privacy to the block explorers that are out there, like blockchain.info, or BlockCypher, or SmartBit, or whatever. I mean, I'm not commenting on whether or not they're cooperating with the authorities or anything like that. It's just good security practice to use your own block explorer if possible. So this is the first thing I wanted to show you. Here's another one. This is what is the trade-off between privacy and implementation complexity of Dandelion? Yeah, so this is a new relay protocol for transactions, right? And we can just sort of take a look at it. It's BIP 156. It's privacy enhancing routing. I mean, I'll just read you the abstract real quick. Bitcoin's transaction spreading protocol is vulnerable to de-anonymization attacks. Dandelion is a transaction routing mechanism that provides formal anonymity guarantees against these attacks. When a node generates a transaction without Dandelion, it transmits that transaction to its peers with independent exponential delays. This approach, known as diffusion in academia, allows network adversaries to link transactions to IP addresses. Dandelion mitigates this class of attacks by sending transactions over a randomly selected path before diffusion. Transactions travel along this path during the stem phase and then are diffused during the fluff phase, hence Dandelion, stem to fluff. We have shown that this routing protocol provides near optimal anonymity guarantees among schemes that do not introduce additional encryption mechanisms. So just as a overview, right now, if you do a normal transaction broadcast and you're not using Tor or something like that, then they know what IP it came from. And based on that, if somebody is tracking, when transactions showed up and which IP it showed up at and so on, then they can figure out, okay, well, that person, it's probably this person. And this may seem a little far-fetched, but this is exactly how advertisers figure out who you are as well. They sort of like know your demographic and things like that. So this Dandelion is meant to be a way to enhance privacy by essentially going through a few hops first, and then there's like a fluff phase where it actually gets diffused. But if you have enough hops between when you sort of secretly broadcast and then it gets like sort of fluffed out to the rest of the network, that would be privacy enhancing. Anyway, the answer was given by Suhas, who's a core developer. And in my view, the main implementation detail to be worked out with Dandelion is ensuring that there are no denial of service vectors introduced. In the existing translation relay model of Bitcoin Core, transactions that do not make it into a node's mempool proxy for what we expect to be eventually mined do not get relayed to other nodes. In the Dandelion protocol, transactions are relayed in the stem phase prior to acceptance into a node's mempool. As a result, there are potential denial of service vectors if transactions can be systematically relayed via Dandelion, but ultimately not be accepted to any node's mempool. So what he's talking about here is there's a possible way in which Dandelion's meant to be this thing to allow relay of transactions and provide privacy, but somebody might just sort of flood the Dandelion network with transactions that aren't actually going to make it into a mempool because they have too few fees and things like that. So this is a very thorough answer, and I encourage you guys to take a look at it. It's a very interesting discussion around privacy, and like at the same time, like protecting the node operators that are actually running the Dandelion protocol. So very good stuff. That's another one I wanted to share. Here's another one. This is the simplicity code in GitHub. This is again by Blockstream. Simplicity is another type of script. Script is the smart contract language in Bitcoin. And simplicity would be like a replacement for script. I mean, script will always sort of be around, but to be backwards compatible with like original transactions and so on. But simplicity would be like sort of a new one, new scripting language and the new smart contract language. The nice thing about simplicity is that you can prove a smart contract's safety. Now, this is something that is very, very difficult in something like Solidity. I mean, like at the very least, there's like Turing completeness. The language that they chose isn't like, there's a lot of type safety issues and things like that. With Simplicity, the goal is to be able to prove that a smart contract is safe. And that's the direction that Bitcoin's been going in is, before you do anything, make sure it's absolutely and critically safe because we have people's money involved. And that's the idea behind this particular project. So they've released it open source. It looks like it's written in Haskell. Yeah. a Haskell implementation, and that's meant to provide certain guarantees and so on. So really, really cool stuff. Let's see some other stuff. Yeah, so Fulgurite. This is another a Trey Dell bonus. Put out to the Lightning Dev email list, all about what Fulgurite is. Fulgurite is, I believe it means fossilized lightning. So this is all about channel states. And if you don't know what channel states are, payment channels are sort of the atomic unit of the Lightning Network. And this is talking about, sort of broadcasting channel states and, thinking about Lightning in a particular way as to make the language around it a little easier to think about, and and getting, better, sort of ways to think about development in it. Anyway, very, very interesting paper. I haven't read through all of it yet, nor do I understand all of it yet, but something to keep track of. Here's another thing on Lightning. Pierre Rochard, easiest Lightning guide, and basically, he talks about how to do a Lightning Power Node launcher, and of course, he has a GitHub with a release. And if you want a Windows node launcher, all you have to do is click this link and launch it on your Windows, and you will have a Lightning node going right away. Very exciting. I plan to try this maybe later in the week after I'm done with finishing my book. My deadline, by the way, is Friday for submitting for production, and then it takes a few months, and then it'll be out then. But yeah, very exciting stuff. Thank you, Pierre, for doing this. Obviously, very good for the community and so on. And hopefully this sort of thing becomes commonplace. All right, so some other stuff. I wrote an article during the week last week, tips on getting through a bear market. Why is it dropping, what you have to do, and sort of the emotional component of dealing with a lot of that stuff. Good stuff. Hopefully, if you haven't read it yet, you can take a look at it. Also in my newsletter, Grin is launching on January 15th. So Grin, if you don't know, is a Mimblewimble implementation. Beam is the other one that I'm aware of. I think the difference is that Beam is written in C++, Grin is written in Rust, and Beam has, I think, something of a prebind. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it too closely. But Mimblewimble is one of those things that's been talked about for quite a long time. I'm kind of surprised that they're launching on their own instead of doing it as a sidechain, which is what I always expected. So for me, this is a little bit kind of like, I imagine it'll have a similar impact like Zcash, in the sense that a lot of people will be really curious at the beginning. And if anybody sort of like offers any sort of trading, it'll get to like crazy valuations at the very beginning, and then it'll slow down later. But yeah, this is obviously something that a lot of people have been watching, including myself, in part because of all the confidential stuff and how there are no amounts or addresses, and you need to do communication. There's a different security model. It's actually original, right? Like unlike a lot of altcoins that are just carbon copies of Bitcoin with like a few things changed, Grin, Mimblewimble, this is actually significantly different. So something I'm keeping track of. Let's see. Here's another one. Vercoin was attacked, with a 51% attack. They've been trying to be ASIC resistant. I really think that's the wrong approach when you're doing any sort of like cryptocurrency. It's just it's not a good idea because you're either going to have botnets or FPGAs, or if anybody figures out how to be able to hash more on your chain, they're going to have a significant advantage. I think ASICs are really at the forefront, and you're not really going to get much better than the best ASICs, even if you have some trade secret or something like that. So I think this sort of thing was inevitable, and of course that's kind of what's happened. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, they are an interesting community because at least they're trying to do like Lightning implementations and stuff like that. But yeah, it's the sort of thing that happens when you're trying to avoid ASICs, is that you're going to have some problems like this. And of course, if you haven't seen this, Munib Ali has done a review of Casper. Casper, if you don't know, is the proof of stake stuff in Ethereum. And this is, to say the least, a scathing review. Among other things, it's not Byzantine fault tolerant, and the criticisms are legion, and there's a lot of really really interesting things here. It might be a little bit difficult to get through unless you know at least some of the math behind it and so on. But yeah, it's pretty scathing, and I would be very hesitant to adopt proof of stake after this review, at least the way they've conceived it currently. Anyway, that does it for Bitcoin Tech Talk. I want to see how that plays and see if people actually like this sort of thing, and if that's something that people find valuable. Obviously, let me know in the comments. Let's get to some questions. I know I had. Let me look up the questions that were in the chat, or not in the chat, in the Twitter. So I have. All right. So let me go to my Twitter account. All right. So Jimmy, a question regarding scaling: is Lightning Network is the only platform currently out there? I'm asking because when calculating at 9 transactions per second, it adds up to more than a decade for everyone just to open one channel. Can you refer me to any source on this? All right. So this sort of question I get quite often, and it's people kind of get hung up on the transactions per second metric, and they sort of project out linearly and go, oh, okay, well, there's like 8 billion people on the planet, and if you do it this way, 8 billion people times, however much the transaction capacity is, it's going to take like 10 years, and they do the math, and they're like, oh no, it can never work, and that kind of assumes zero innovation in between that time, between now and when there's worldwide adoption and so on. Lightning, I think, can be a layer. It's obviously a layer on top of Bitcoin. It can also serve as a layer for something else. And it's possible to do things, have a layer 3 protocol or something like that. The key here, though, is that we don't know of all possible innovations that you can do on top of Lightning. Lightning itself is still sort of being solidified, ossified, fossilized, whatever, because we have things like Schnorr that would make things a lot easier, SIG hash no input, things like that, which would definitely make things, make Lightning simpler, easier, and so on. So this question with regard to Lightning and being like, is Lightning the end of scaling or something like that, I think is kind of a very linearly thinking question, and life and technology and innovation just it isn't very linear. So what I would say is that Lightning is just one of many possible ways to scale. Obviously, there's stuff like sidechains. Liquid sidechain is out there. Dry chains is on testnet, and so on. There's a lot of ways in which something can something could work out. We don't know the space of all possible innovations, and that's for entrepreneurs, right? If you figure out a way to scale when there's a need to scale, when there's there are people that are willing to pay for that scaling, that's when the innovation really comes. A lot of these projects that are, claiming 50,000 transactions per second or whatever, it's all just mostly marketing, and because there's no actual demand for that sort of transaction speed for any of these, right? Like, the most popular Ethereum, D app is like 100 daily active users. You don't need 50,000 transactions per second. Even if you did that, I mean, like, until you get to that point, like, and people are willing to pay for it or something like that, it's not really like you're prematurely optimizing, and of course that's the root of a lot of evil in any sort of coding. So let's see. Here's another question. Tudor Holotescu. Do we really need any other crypto than BTC? Assuming crypto is referring to cryptocurrency, I don't think so. As far as store of value is concerned, and that's where Bitcoin competes. Again, like the transaction per second, like payment network, kind of method of payment use case. There's a lot of other things that are very, very good at it, and they're optimized for it, right? Like, if you're a centralized entity, method of payment is where you make your money, and they're very almost every one of those are very motivated to get people on their platform. That's why there's just so much competition, because that you take even like 1 basis point off of all the possible transactions going through, you can make a lot of money. So they're a lot more motivated to innovate on that front. Bitcoin is competing where there's very few competitors. Store of value, there's not that much competition, to be honest. You got like real estate, you got gold, maybe some sort of collectible. If you're like collecting Picassos or something like that, those store value pretty well. Certain rare items, those store pretty well on value. But Bitcoin's got a lot of other additional things like divisibility, fungibility, and things like that, like at least more than these other things. So in many ways, that's where Bitcoin is, and for store value, at least, that's where it's competing, and that's where it's doing, I think, a pretty good job. Over the last 10 years, it's gone from a price of 0 to 3,500 or something like that. Like, you got to understand, that's a giant accomplishment. A lot of people just aren't aware of the accomplishment that Bitcoin really is. But yeah, is there another space for crypto that's a payment network? I don't know if there's a real need for that, because there, like I said, there's a lot of other payment networks. Now, maybe like a coin for darknet markets, a coin for international remittances, possibly. But as soon as those are seen as profitable, somebody else will come in and probably do a better job as a centralized entity, and it will probably have a better user experience and so on. So I don't know. I don't really think so, but I could be wrong, and that's something that I would have to time will tell. Please talk about your thoughts on Monero. The Monero core team has a bi-yearly hard fork. It's optional, however. The majority of the users and pretty much all exchanges agree to continue on the new chain. Is this really centralized? Yeah. If you're hard forking and you don't if you run an old Monero client and your chain just doesn't progress because it's hard forked, then it's not really your coin. It's a coin determined by whoever did the hard forking. So I think it's centralized. Now, as far as like the level of centralization, maybe it's a little less than, say, something like Ethereum or something like that. But I'd say it's still centralized. Do you think Bitcoin can live alongside fiat, where Bitcoin is a store of value and fiat is a medium of exchange? Possibly. The big thing to remember there is that there's Gresham's law. And here's the thing about Gresham's law: bad money is spent first, and good money is kept. So in Venezuela, for example, people will spend their bolivars as fast as possible and will keep the US dollars. And for obvious reasons, by the end of the week, your bolivars might have depreciated by 15%. So it's in your interest to get rid of it. So If you're buying some essential, say like food or water or toilet paper or whatever, and you have the option to pay in bolivars, of course you're going to. And that's the quote unquote medium of exchange. It's really method of payment. Medium of exchange can be over time, which can be which store value is a subset. Method of payment, you're going to use the worst money that you have, right? Like so, for example, if I am buying a plane ticket, I am going to see if I can use my miles first, especially if I'm like going on vacation or something like that, and it's just directly cost attributable to me. I'm gonna because that's the worst money. Like dollars are a lot more useful than airline miles or whatever. And that's the general tendency of people, is to use the method of payment that is least valuable to you until you get to progressively until the most valuable, and that's Gresham's law. So for a while, I expect that to be the case, where people are using fiat for method of payment, but Bitcoin as a store of value, as Bitcoin gets more and more valuable, you're like it's. I talk about my beef jerky story all the time, right? I bought some beef jerky back in 2013 when Bitcoin was around $400, and that was good beef jerky. I bought like $100 worth of beef jerky, and that was like 0.25 Bitcoin or something like that. That was good beef jerky, but it wasn't worth $1,000, right? Like with an asset that goes up, the tendency is to want to hold the asset instead of spending it on something like that. I mean, I would have been much better off just spending $100 instead of the 0.25 Bitcoin. So that's I think like where people will come to that realization. I mean, there's a lot of people on RBTC that are going on and on about, we should always use it for media and for method of payment, blah blah blah, and they're like raking me over the coals about like using Visa instead. Really, it's all about using the bad money first, and that's really the rational thing to do economically. Like, does that hurt adoption or whatever? I don't think so. I think store of value, the more you value something, the more other people can value it because you value it, because at the very least, they know they could dump it to you. And that's what it means to be a holder of last resort. It's the person that is willing to hold it because they actually believe in it. And if you've studied Bitcoin, then that's where you are. All right, let's look at the next one. Crypto booms and busts have all been through a bull market. How do you think a recession would affect crypto prices and adoption? So there's two schools of thought on this. There's the school of thought that's like, Bitcoin becomes a flight of safety, so Bitcoin goes up during a recession. They've thought that about gold for a long time as well, that during a recession, that gold would go up. Until the last recession, when actually gold went down along with all the other stuff. And that's probably because a lot of investment assets have more or less turned into a store of value. And like during a recession, it becomes kind of, people get nervous. Did I choose the right store of value? And they go into something more liquid, like US dollars or something like that. So given that the liquidity of US dollars are still way, way more than something like, gold or Bitcoin or whatever, the other side of the argument is that, okay, well, when you have a recession, the asset prices of everything go down. And I'm more of the latter, and I suspect there's a recession coming, but we'll see exactly if that comes to a head or whatever. All right, what is the best mining equipment? Hard to say. I know there's a lot of different mining manufacturers that are finally coming out with things in bulk, just as we're entering a bear market. So they're gonna get squeezed on both sides here because they have a lot of inventory, and the profit margins are gonna be tiny. But I'm not sure. I'm sure it's not the Antminer though, because you can You can buy those on eBay for like $300 or $400 for like an S9 or something like that. A lot of miners from China are trying to sell them at like $150 to $200 a piece. Thousands of these miners. The profitability has gone down significantly, and so yeah, that doesn't bode very well for a lot of these mining companies, especially Bitmain, because they do still have a lot of inventory and so on. Let's see. When are you coming to LA next? I don't have any plans on going to LA. I I mean, I'm open to coming to do my seminar, but it's a bear market. I don't know if there's any particular need. There's no real conferences there that seem interesting to me. So looks like that's about it for questions here. Let's just take a look at some of the prices and seeing what's going on and so on. So Ethereum has dropped quite a bit, since its high. I mean, it was trading over $1,000 at one point, so it's gone down over 90% since its peak. So we've all been paying attention a little bit, at least, to Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV. It's interesting that all three are like right around like that $100 level. I honestly wonder if just that's like a convenient shelling point or something like that. I'm not really sure. A lot of these other things are continue to go down. The further you go down, the bigger the percentage changes tend to be, and so on. The liquidity on these things tend to be tiny. Still curious how Ripple continues to keep up the price, but then again, it has a fraction of the volume of everything else. So that might be, XRP and Stellar in particular. Not sure what's going on, but one other thing I wanted to look at on Twitter, and somebody alerted me to this earlier today. This is Vitalik, non-giver of Ether. So he had a long tweet storm that I want to take a look at. All right, so time for a brief tweet storm on non-financial applications of blockchains. Now, you guys may have heard me make a bet with Joe Lubin exactly about this topic. So I wanted to share this because this was kind of hilarious, actually. As blockchain scalability gets better and better, and UX improves and fees drop as a result, this will become a bigger and bigger part of the story. Really, Vitalik? Because it's been 5 years, haven't seen really anything like non-financial applications of blockchain. So, almost everything can be done cheaper, faster, easier as a centralized service, and that's the mentality I will go in with for the rest of this tweet storm. One underappreciated way to view blockchains is as an extension of cryptography that does different things. Cryptography allows you to encrypt data, prove data was signed by someone, et cetera, et cetera. Blockchains, on the other hand, allow you to prove that a piece of data was not published. Okay, and why would you need that proof? Because as a if it's an application, there's already a centralized entity that's responsible for that stuff. If you don't trust that centralized entity, then you shouldn't be using it in the first place. If you do trust them, then you don't need necessarily prove that a piece of data wasn't published. So a simple example is a blockchain university degree verification app I saw recently. All right, so here that's like one of the main things that everyone always says is, oh, you could have degrees on the blockchain and you could verify or whatever. You got to remember that there's already somebody centralized that's issuing the degree. And this is more a UX problem with the degree issuer, not anything that a blockchain adds. So, for example, I went to the University of Michigan, and if they say somebody wanted to verify that I went there, they call up the office and they go, okay, well, did Jimmy go to the University of Michigan? And you can find out if I did go to the University of Michigan. And then say, okay, and they'll tell you, well, he came here, blah, blah, blah. And you would have that verification. Now, you can do it online or whatever, and that would be a lot more convenient for people. And that would probably be the IT infrastructure upgrade that would be necessary, and especially if there was like a known public key for the university. But blockchain doesn't actually add anything, right? Like, because you have to kind of trust that university in the first place, and if you already trust that university, then like it doesn't really add anything to have a blockchain have it, because you're gonna go ask that entity, or you're gonna trust their public key anyway. So I don't see what you're getting out of putting it into a blockchain. And like, as far as revocations and stuff, that means like going on their website and looking at their public key, or whatever, like that's there's a way to figure out that it's actually the University of Michigan, and so on. This use case doesn't make any sense, and he continues down this thread to check that a degree was not yet revoked. You can simply scan the chain and check all the logs of the revocation contract. Or you could just like ask the university, right? Like that's the right way to verify something, is to ask the issuer instead of doing this convoluted blockchain stuff. Because, instead of like going on the blockchain and doing all this verification, there should be some sort of like, in an ideal world, you just have an API call that says, okay, did this person go to this university? And you get some proof that they did, or signed message from the university or something like that. That's the way it should happen. Instead, Vitalik's all talking about, oh yeah, you need to do this or that, and you need to use blockchains. You need to use blockchains. Blah blah blah. It's insane. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You can extend this to other contexts. One big one is key revocation and self-sovereign identity. All right, so that one actually is useful, but that's something that you can do on Bitcoin. That's what Christopher Allen is working on, is self-signed, decentralized self-signed identity. There's no website for you per se. I mean, for those that do, that the HTTPS and SSL and all that stuff might work, but having it on the Bitcoin blockchain would make some sense. So I encourage you to go take a look at that. Another category of use cases is verifying integrity of processes. For example, in an auction, you might want to verify that everyone's bid that was submitted on time was included and no late bids were included. If bids are published to chain, even encrypted, you can do this. Of course, that doesn't mean that you could do that, but there's plenty of shill bidding that you could do and stuff. You have to trust the auction giver in the first place. So there's already a centralized entity. If you're already trusting them, then all of this additional verification doesn't really matter. And like if somebody's actually going to audit that, then that's a third party that you're going to have to trust. Like all of these use cases always have some sort of centralized entity you're trusting already. It's like, okay, well, you can use blockchain, blah blah blah, to not have to quite trust them that much. Yeah, you don't, but you also don't need a blockchain. You can just like put it on their central website, and instead of having it on this decentralized blockchain, and like you don't have to trust them quite as much. Well, they can also give you proof from a centralized database with signed messages and so on, and have a Merkle root published or whatever. Like, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. All right, so let's keep going. There are also many categories of use cases where different applications need to be on a common database, and it's just more convenient or less risk of capture if it's credibly neutral platform. Again, you already have to trust somebody, right? Whoever's running the auction, whatever. And it's quote unquote credibly neutral. Well, yeah, you could do that by providing proofs to everybody. Like all of the stuff that he's saying needs to be on a blockchain, you can provide from a central database, and it's the exact same thing. Like, except you don't have to incur the cost of putting your stuff on Ethereum with gas and all that. I mean, he's obviously shilling his own bag, right? Like, he's saying, oh, you got to use Ethereum to do this, and this. No, you don't. You can do it from a central database, and it'd be a lot cheaper, a lot faster, a lot easier. Public blockchains have a genuine competitive advantage over both centralized servers and consortium chains, incredibly signaling neutrality. No, you could prove that you already, that this was the state at a particular point in time by providing a hash at a certain amount of time or whatever. And, if you have backups and you have auditors or whatever, there's lots of ways to credibly do that without requiring a public blockchain. Again, he's like making public blockchains as like the ultimate neutral third party, when in fact his blockchain has been rolled back on his orders. So it doesn't make any sense. It's really just like trust me instead of trusting this other party. Nope, I don't think that's a very good idea. Blockchains of the future with proof of stake and sharding will be thousands of times more efficient. Sure they are. Yeah, right. Whatever. Talk to me when proof of stake protocol isn't criticized to a massive degree, and is actually Byzantine fault tolerant, isn't actually centralized, and so on. He's saying you should trust me is basically what he's saying. All right, blockchains are not about cutting computational costs. That certainly is true. Blockchains are about incurring a sacrifice in the form of increased computational costs to achieve a decrease in social costs. I would argue that is completely false, because the social costs are that you have to trust Vitalik instead in this case. So there's no decrease in social costs. You're having to trust the Ethereum dev team instead of some other centralized entity. So it doesn't make any sense. Whatever he's saying. Oh gosh. Computers have become 1 trillion times cheaper per unit of computation in the last 70 years. That I agree with. Human labor has gotten more expensive, at least in dollar terms. So incurring high technical costs to achieve reduction in social costs is at least sometimes a very good bargain. That would be true if you actually have reductions in social costs. You don't in this case. So he's wrong there. If layer 1 becomes cheap enough, I literally foresee things like receipts of everyday purchases being published to blockchain. Why do you need that published on a freaking blockchain? That's nobody's business but yours and the merchants, okay? What they should be giving you is a signed receipt. Okay, and that should be kept by the person issuing it and the person receiving it. It should not be on a public blockchain. That's a complete privacy leak. That's stupid. That's idiotic. Okay, this is like this is, oh gosh, this is saying, okay, you know what? We need surveillance of everybody doing it, so that if it's cheap, just put it on the blockchain. Who cares about privacy? This is so stupid. I can't. I need to calm down. Okay. That is just so idiotic. All right. Another interesting thing about blockchains is the value of permanence. Yeah, that would be true if your chain actually was permanent. But yeah, you hard fork all the time and you roll things back. So I don't think that's actually the case. And I think it's overrated in any case. There's a lot of devices that are write once, read many. So that's just as permanent and more private. I would say that would be where you would want to keep things. Centralized servers can decide to change the rules later. Yeah, kind of like Ethereum. They can get hacked, or they can get just shut down if the company disappears. Yeah, just like Ethereum. Blockchain Merkle receipt, on the other hand, is forever. No, well, so are all sorts of other public key receipts. As long as you have a copy, you have it. That's it. This is such a stupid argument. Non-financial applications have a leg up over financial ones in one important sense. There is less at stake if they break, so fewer reasons to fear deploying them fairly quickly. There is less at stake if they break. Well, I mean, it depends on the application. There might be more at stake if it's your health records, right? Like you might value those more than financial. I mean, depending on the amount of money and what kind of health information it is. So, so they could be the first applications deployed widely, especially in institutional context. I don't think Vitalik understands just sort of what sort of data and privacy trade-offs there are in this kind of thing. So this is a ridiculous tweet storm. And when I read it, I was just like, you gotta be kidding. This guy has zero understanding of like what actually can get used and so on. I don't know why people deify him as if he's like this some sort of boy genius. This guy has practically zero real world experience as a software developer, as far as I can tell, because like the things he's saying is ridiculous. And his coin is very much centralized. So all of the stuff that he's talking about can be done in a much more efficient manner, faster, easier, better by doing it centralized. The only thing that you can't do by making it a blockchain token is issue new money. That's mostly why people have been doing ICOs. It's to be able to print their own money and raise funds very cheaply and easily, and without, I guess, as much scrutiny as you would get if you were raising money from private investors. So, I wanted to rant a little bit about that because he deserves it, as far as I can tell, because this is absolutely ridiculous. This is the worst. I mean, this is the mentality that we have to call out, because the blockchains are not useful like this. And the one application of blockchain that's actually useful is Bitcoin itself. And and it's a very expensive, slow, and hard to change thing. Turns out that's a pretty good fit for Bitcoin. For almost everything else, that is not the right fit. And a centralized database with maybe like public key cryptography or something like that would be a lot better than what he is proposing here. So, all right. So I've been ranting for quite a while. Let me see if there are any questions or any thoughts here. Oh man, there's a lot of people that have commented. Man. Somebody's asking me about Richard Hart. Oh, actually, let's just take a quick look at the Ethereum. Yeah, I just wanted to remind people that Ethereum, at least relative to Bitcoin, is at its lowest price since, I don't know, March of 2017, something like that, when it went on that little pump there. And it's like, I think, right around like the peak here. So we'll see. I still think it has lower to go on that score, but something to think about. As far as Richard Hart, I mean, he rage quit BTC, so I don't pay attention to him at all anymore. He can do whatever he wants, but he's not that interesting to me. Let's see. Agreed with. All right. So, any other questions? F dropped. Fully agree. How can you have weekends if you understand what Bitcoin is? Well, clearly a lot of people don't. What's on the horizon for BTC? Will there be any improvements in 2019? I think I've shown a bunch of the improvements just in my newsletter, and I publish that every week. Hopefully I can do this again next Monday, and we can talk about some of the other improvements. All right, let's see. Are there any other questions? All right. Yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah. A lot of people are trying to get rich off of their own token, right? And that's something that we need to be really, really aware of. All these people that are like marketing about like 50,000 TPS and, we can do proof of stake, we don't use as much energy. Those are all marketing speak because they're trying to sell you something, specifically their own token, the money that they printed. Please buy this. That's like, you should be very, very skeptical of the claims of any of these, because they don't have your best interest in mind. What they have is you pumping their bags. That's what they want by having you buy their coin. So if you're buying anything but Bitcoin, you are usually making somebody else rich, including people like Joe Lubin and Vitalik Buterin and something like that, and people like that who are continually, touting cases that make zero sense. No, you're not going to have a Facebook competitor on Ethereum. Okay, like that doesn't make any freaking sense. You can't scale anywhere near that high, and Facebook's always going to be ahead of you, like by orders of magnitude. Like I dare say, like 4 or 5 orders of magnitude. So yeah, I like. please be a lot more skeptical of people that are saying stuff like that. And in this bear market, that's going to be a lot easier than during the bull market when, oh my gosh, I made like a 10x on this or that or whatever. The first instinct that you should have when somebody is trying to sell you, like is telling you all the good things about a particular crypto is, well, why is this person trying to sell me on this? So yeah, I would say that that's something to think very closely about. All right. Let me stop screen sharing. Um, yeah. So anyway, thank you for hanging out with me. And you know, I don't know how popular this video is going to be. I haven't done one of these live ones in a while, ever since Tone went to Australia and was in that part of the world or whatever. So I wanted to show my face, tell people that I'm alive or whatever. So yeah, at least based on the context of the conversation that I've had, you know that I've been alive for at least a week or whatever. So anyway, thank you guys for joining me. I will be releasing the short form videos hopefully like over the next few days as well. You know, it's always good to like connect with people, and I do enjoy doing that. By the way, I came back from Sydney last night. Love Australia. I just wanted to give a shout out to all those people that I met in Sydney. Fantastic country, really delicious beef. And man, that was one of the best steaks that I've ever had when I had a 28-ounce Wagyu dry aged beef, Australian beef. That was just that was just amazing, and I look forward to going back there again just to eat the beef. You guys have to organize like a Bitcoin conference at some point. Anyway, thank you guys. This song is done.